And maybe we will get started then with, is there anybody new? Josh, I haven't met you. You want to just say hello, who you are and what organization you're with?
Hey everybody, Josh Skipworth, he, him, and I am with Action for the Climate Emergency.
Right on. Anybody else who this is your first call want to just say a quick hello? Okay, Sarah, why don't we go for it? Thanks, Josh. Welcome.
There we go. As we have done in previous calls, we will kick this off with a what's new. And I have a few items, but if someone else has a what's new to add to the list, please raise your hand. You can tag on after me. So part of what's new since we last met is a group of us did end up whipping together and quickly submitting at the last 11th hour a comment on direct pay. I was inspired to get myself in action, write that letter, because Sasha asked me, Sarah, what should we say? Where's the comment letter? And I hadn't done it yet. So like, oh, I'm letting Sasha down. I need to get my act together. So we did get a comment, and you can click on the link and see what several of us did end up submitting. Several of you noticed that there was a heavy focus on HVAC. And several of you had questions, as I did, around the interaction between the domestic content requirements and the direct pay provision. So I'm just going to spend a few seconds on each of those two. And then Harley, we would love to have, someone from your group come and talk more about those direct pay and domestic content interactions, because it was reading your piece that enlightened me about that interaction that I had not fully grokked. So kudos to, teach me something with that piece. So I appreciate it. So first, the focus on HVAC, the gist of our letter was really talking about the need to create more certainty for decision makers and decision makers that are early on in a building process and don't yet have the benefit of the contractors and developers who live and breathe these incentives. So by way of contrast, when you decide to go solar, it's typically disconnected from a building project. You can kind of do it anytime. You can slap it on a building later.
Welcome to Zoom. Enter your meeting ID followed by pound.
Ooh. And so there's not as much, and you're working directly with a solar developer in that moment, who solar developers live and breathe this incentive, the
Enter
investment
your
tax
participant
credit.
ID followed by pound.
That's
Otherwise,
right.
just
You,
press
Mary.
pound to continue.
Yeah, Mary, there we go.
Jonathan, do that.
Solar developers live and breathe this tax credit. They're very used to talking about it. And so they are well positioned to talk schools through these incentives. Conversely, mostly HVAC contractors, they are not yet even engaged early on in a school building project when folks are trying to make a decision about what HVAC system to choose. So as I've been going along for the ride with districts and new construction projects, they are typically trying to make decisions around, do I do a gas boiler or do I do a heat pump before there are any contractors, signed on to the project. And that means they are doing this somewhat blind without the help of folks who are used to an expert in this credit. So in order for this policy to have the effect it wants, which is to drive a change in decision-making through a change in price point, we really need to help what is essentially volunteer school boards understand these tax credits and incorporate that into their decision-making before they have any formal contractors signed on to a project. They haven't even bid it out yet. They certainly are not about to start investing in the help of a tax professional early on. So we really need to find ways to help them get some sense of the size of these credits and and help build their confidence around it. And so that's why we had a focus on HVAC, because the other technologies that schools would normally use, buses, solar energy storage, those are all going to be done with entities that are, really living and breathing these tax credits. So HVAC is the one where we're seeing a lot of gap and a lot of need. So that was the first piece and why the focus. And the second piece, and I will say that focus is echoed in the letter that was submitted by climate mayors. If you want to go back and read that letter, they also focused heavily on geothermal and heavily on the challenges that folks decision makers are having, early on in integrating these new price signals. The other piece of the letter that we focused on was the interaction between domestic content and direct pay, which I had not fully understood, which is that and Harley, correct me if I'm wrong, because you're the expert here. Actually, Harley, do you just want to talk it through come 2025? Will you explain this interaction a little bit for folks? Would you mind?
Let me pull it up if you can. It's
Okay.
2026, but let me pull it up.
26. Okay, so come 2026, if a project does not meet the domestic content requirements, they cannot take advantage of elective pay, full stop, like 0%. So in other words, the full value of the investment tax credit is at risk come 2025,
Six, yeah.
if you do not meet domestic content, not just the 10% bonus credit.
Right.
I did not realize that until I read Harley's piece, or the blue-green piece. That's a pretty big deal. And again, puts a lot of, it's a pretty high stakes proposition then, like we need decision makers, again, going back to HVAC. If we want them to choose geothermal over the gas boiler, we not only need to get them confident that these investment tax credits exist and they're going to get them, we also need to take them confident very early on in a building process, like years before they are actually having shovels in the ground, that they're going to be able to meet the domestic content requirements, because if they don't, they will get 0. That's a pretty big deal. So some of our comments were trying to soften the edges of that without undermining the intent behind that policy, but really to have folks be doing a 3-year look forward into market conditions and supply chain conditions, because that's the point at which schools are going to have to be making decisions with like a 3-year look forward. I'm following schools that are making decisions around HVAC decisions this fall, who will not put shovels in the ground until 2025, will not commence construction, until they are really will need to fully comply with this domestic content rule. That was the gist of the comment. Any questions on that? And again, we can do a deeper dive, maybe with someone from Blue Green at a future session. Seems warranted.
Yeah, so just
paper that Harley and VJ wrote on that, or is that not public?
Say that again, Julia.
Did you say
Julia.
there is an article that you wrote, Harley or VJ did? Thank you.
yeah, so what I'm looking at right now on page 5 is what Sarah's referencing. So you have the two pieces. You have, if you want direct pay, you have to meet the domestic content requirements. And then also, if you want the domestic content bonus credit, you have that 10%. And so basically, there's some grace. So for 2024, if you don't meet it, you can still get not 100% of direct pay, but around 90. And then it goes down a little bit in 2025, and then it decreases completely in 2026. So yeah, just to confirm, Sarah, I talked to Ben Beachy on my team, who's our VP for manufacturing, and he's happy to jump on the call. So I'll just make sure I flag the date for him for our next call.
Great. Cool. Okay, anything else before I move off of that piece in that letter? And again, you can see kind of how we propose that the IRS potentially navigate that if you read the letter. All right, I'm going to keep going here because we have a packed agenda. What's also new since we last met is 2 new notices of funding opportunities were issued for components of the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund, the National Clean Investment Fund, and the Clean Communities Investment Accelerator, both of which I think are potentially sources of funds for schools. Money will have to run through intermediaries before it gets to schools, but both those funds are potential. And if folks are interested, when I attended those webinars, which will eventually be posted on the EPA website. I put the links there. They're not there yet, but they said they would go back and post them. You know, as I sat through the webinars, both of those competitions, the National Clean Investment Fund and the Clean Communities Investment Accelerator, teams are applying to shepherd those funds into the marketplace. And one of the functions that teams need to have, or that is eligible for support, financial support, is kind of market development work, the kind of work that many of us do. In other words, kind of preparing customers to move in this direction. So it's an interesting kind of opportunity for groups that are interested in helping schools access this money to investigate these two competitions and potentially affiliate themselves with some of the groups leading the charge on responding. Groups like Coalition for Green Capital, Calvert, I've heard, is also putting together a package or putting together a response to these NOFOs. So FYI. Anything there quickly? Okay, the other new thing since we last talked is I've been working up some case studies that are linked at the bottom of our first page of resources. So you'll see if you roll up to the first page at the bottom, there's a new case study section. And I have slides, the slides that I presented at Anissa's event about Fort River Elementary. And then I have two new case studies from schools here in Massachusetts, one a new construction on a brownfield, and then another, a retrofit here in Massachusetts, where I'm starting to integrate the IRA into the economics. And you're starting to see the comparative economics of gas infrastructure versus heat pumps, in particular geothermal, and they're very, very attractive. So if you guys want to see some of those economics, there's some nice tables in both of those presentations where you can see what it's looking like. So exciting stuff, and we'll continue to add more case studies. Any other updates that folks want to bring in on any of their summer work? Stuff that we need to touch back on here? People are like, no, I've been summering.
The third webcast in the series that we've been running for school districts is posted now. The one that Sarah spoke on, which we're very grateful for. Those are posted on our online courses, and they're free. And when we finish the fourth one, which is next Wednesday, which is sort of the like unanswered questions, tying up loose ends one, we'll collect them all into like a series page. So then we'll have all four of them together in one place for distribution and pointing people to some education that they can tap into about the various provisions.
Awesome. Great.
If anyone has called into those sessions and has great ideas for me about what exactly we need to be addressing on the last one, we have a loose plan based on what we've heard from attendees, but I would love opinions. And so feel free to email me, Anissa at USGC, if you've got some thoughts. I'm finalizing that plan right now, so would love your wisdom.
Great. Christy's asking for a link. I don't know if it sounds like you don't have the series yet, but maybe you can point her in the direction, maybe the most recent one.
Yeah.
All right. Jonathan, I think we're turning it over to you for a preview of our new page.
Great. Thanks, Sarah. So one of the kind of summer projects we talked about last time we were together was trying to pull together a resource on schools and the IRA. We sent out a link yesterday, but I will just drop it again. We thought maybe we'd give you a quick just voiceover. I'll share my screen. Let's see how to do this. Do you see something that says schools and the Inflation Reduction Act? Great. So it's pretty high altitude, a landing page. This is not like live on our site yet, like you have to know the URL to find it. So this is really a draft, and we wanted to just give a little voiceover and see if anything sparks today in terms of immediate thoughts or feedback, and or folks can, hoping folks will follow up with us offline. But a landing page like, hey, there's new resources, and then kind of 4 subsequent pages, like what does this support, why should you do it, how does the reimbursement work, and then all kinds of resources that we've been curated. So if you click on the what page, you get to this page. Right, so far it just talks about solar energy, with some features and resources, energy storage, resources and examples, ground source heat pumps. Before we go live, we wanted to add something about charging infrastructure, something about clean transportation, school buses, and something about 179D and energy efficiency. So those right now are kind of the 6 technologies that we're planning to feature. Then we have a page on like why schools should invest in this. It's kind of the 4 ideas. 1, this is about kids' health and well-being and education. This can support resilience, this can be cost effective, and this can decrease emissions. And so for each of those 4 ideas, we give some sort of data on like the rationale and point the reader to some resources. So that's all here. And then the third page is sort of the how-to, again, basics on investment tax credits, direct pay, how much money can I receive back, how to think about that calculation, and then a little bit about how it works with sort of the timeline and the process. And then, of course, a link back to the White House or other more authoritative sources than just us. And then the last page are these resources, and these are at this point, essentially the same resources that are, linked in our agenda that we've all been sharing among ourselves that are now, would just be kind of out there and more public facing for anybody that's looking for them around direct pay resources or bonus credits. So, the piece, by Blue Green Alliance is up here, or the piece that U.S. Green Buildings Council did, around sort of IIJA and IRA, generally are up here at the top. So that's what we got done so far over the last 6 weeks or something like that, and appreciate everyone that has been kind of sharing resources to date. We're trying to build something that you all would feel good about using if somebody asked you a question, and point folks to. So if you have feedback or things you want to encourage us to include on it, please let us know. So maybe I'll stop there and see if anybody has any, initial reactions or thoughts for us. Oh, great. I'm seeing there's a lot in the chat that while I was talking, I was not seeing. Okay. So we are planning to put together continue building the site. If you would like to be a reviewer on it and kind of read it carefully for us, please raise your hand and let us know, like, hey, I would spend a minute, an hour reading the site. Definitely welcome that. And we'll put together a little social media toolkit and comms toolkit for folks so that we can put it out. Anything else on that, Sarah or Sarah?
I guess I would just say if folks have seen other websites that are doing a job, talking through this information for other kind of constituencies that you all want to share, there may be nuggets in there that we can distill down, borrow, copycat. There's no need to remake the wheel here. And so, totally open. I know WRI, you guys have a ton of resources on your website for like school buses, and we'll want to be borrowing and, pointing back there. But if folks have other sites that they've seen that are doing a good job of this, feel free to point us in that direction if you have favorites.
And if there are gaps, there are common questions that come up that would be helpful to have posted in one place too, just shoot us an email anytime, and we're constantly iterating and building up.
Okay, well, one of the front page things on the website is an opportunity to share about a project. And one of the things we've talked about is starting to track, projects across the country that are planning to leverage the IRA. Sarah, you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, great. You know, as we see schools starting to move and be positioned to take advantage of these credits, we knew we wanted to start to kind of catalog those and capture those, have them all in a place. And we can imagine a bunch of different use cases for that. You know, as we move closer to an election cycle, there's certainly going to be more and more opportunity to kind of use this for political purposes and be showing the breadth of incentives that are flowing into all parts of the country. And so, you know, having a map of the whole country that shows school districts across in red states and blue taking advantage of these tax credits, getting to improve buildings, seems like a good asset for the community to have. We also will be continuing to build out, you know, case studies as we've just, you know, started doing slide form, but we'll be doing it more for, you know, general consumption, telling the story of this policy and how it's helping to make our schools healthier, more efficient, more cost effective. And then just, you know, general communications, we can imagine with policymakers in states or, you know, with press that are looking to cover this. I already, Anissa, I think Mark Lieberman from Ed Week must have watched your webinar and saw this form because he already emailed being like, you have data? How many schools? How many? Like, Mark, I got like the 4 that I put in there myself, dude. We're not there yet, but I'm going to talk to a bunch of people, basically all of you, about, you know, helping to grow a resource that, you know, could be potentially an asset for all of us in terms of starting to enumerate and capture and have a shared list of folks doing this work. So really want to, you know, we know that the people on this call are the ones that are going to help us build this list. We think it's very unlikely that school districts will take time to do this, but if we all have a shared interest in cataloging and compiling this list of schools, you know, so wanted to ask whether this is something, an asset that you all think would be valuable to have, and want to hear from folks that think they are maybe well positioned in their travels, like, oh yeah, I will be running into schools. I do have direct contact with school districts that are going to be using these policies. I would be in a position to be a contributor, and, you know, share your thoughts about whether you would be willing to contribute to a database like this. So 1, is this a helpful asset for us to have? And 2, you know, are you someone who is going to be in a position to contribute to it? We have a very quiet group here today. What's going on? Can start cold calling on some people.
I thought that was like a to let us know later, not a now one, Sarah.
Oh, sorry.
Did you want us to chime in now?
I want you to chime in now. Is this a useful asset to have? A list, you know, like building a database of schools across the country. I'm using this, you know, piece of IRA. I'm using this piece of IRA. Contact people.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I've just been. Go ahead. Oh, I thought there was someone else talking. Sorry, I couldn't. So I think this will be really useful. I'm assuming that at some point, all the owners' reps are going to start actually knowing about this and using it well, and that it will kind of escape us, the kind of front vanguard leading edge of it. I mean, I hope that everyone starts using it. But certainly for us, for now, I think really, really useful, and kind of, yes, I will be in position to share, and totally will share. Those were your last 2 questions, were like, can you and will you?
Yeah. Dave, you want to jump in?
Yeah. It's a great idea, and we will help out and add things there as they come up. But there's even a pre-step to this. I would like to get information on, and you guys might have this more than I do, is that a number of cities and counties and school districts have already passed a resolution saying that by X date they want to do this anyway. So almost as a first step about where we can put in resources and think about building, you know, campaigns, because we're not going to be able to do it everywhere. We hope it happens everywhere. But so the mayor's list is the perfect example. All those climate mayors who are already active, who already have written, they've read their letter carefully. A little surprised and glad that the direction they went in. But to see them active like that is really helpful. Los Angeles, for example, just passed a whole lot of stuff around this. Our local unions might, more of them might include requests or, demands in contract negotiations that this work, be done over the next several years. But I want a roadmap and getting help on building that roadmap of where we think that would be really good.
Great. Sue, did you want to jump in?
Yeah, thanks. I just wanted to say yes. I think this would be a very useful list. And certainly as we start to gather information specifically, on electric school buses, I know Carolina and others would be doing the same, would want to add to it. I'm expecting it's going to take a little time because they're not quite activated yet. So, in terms of that particular part of the tax credits and so forth. And I think this is maybe obvious to everyone, but the reasons that I think are so helpful are one, because, well, maybe there's three, but okay, one, at least that, we see it happening. And then two, that, maybe schools or others can then know who to go to if they want help or, contact a peer and be like, oh, so-and-so used it, and I know them and I'm going to reach out and find out how it worked or just be inspired by that. Then three, also, the more, obviously we hope it works out this way, the more that it shows use in, blue, red, and purple areas of the country, the more helpful that's going to be to continue to, just keep support alive for these as well. So big fan of this idea.
Yeah. You guys maintain a list, right, of schools that have already purchased electric school buses, right?
Yeah. So we, hopefully capture a lot of that part of things, but
yeah,
less on the other parts, obviously.
Yeah. Do you have any tips for us in terms of how to do that? Okay, maybe another conversation. Are there some quick hit tips? Is this like pulling teeth? Or because I asked Anissa about her trying to get ESSER dollars, data on ESSER, how ESSER dollars were spent.
Well,
and it was very challenging.
It's not so hard when you have like grant programs that are largely paying for most of the buses. And so you just have to kind of like keep track on that. Not that that's easier. It's harder to know when, a bus hits the road versus gets the money, because
Sure.
that's not as well, publicized. So it all depends on what you're trying to track, like how far upstream you want to be. Like, do you want to know when the heat pump gets installed, or just that the, tax credit was activated or what have you? And I guess I'd be curious as to what information is available through the IRS and what kind of lag there is and what kind of FOAs you can start putting in place. We get a lot of information that way too. Anyhow, so just, there could be a lot of different ways to get at this.
Yeah. I'm thinking of this right now, and Carol, I'll come to you next, is like very upstream leads. Like the ones that I've put in there so far are like people who seems like they're headed in that direction and I want to follow up with them. So this is like way upstream leads right now to follow up on. Craig.
Yeah, I think this is a great start and really helpful. So yes, it will be helpful having case studies on this. Always clearly explain information, always. I want to double down on what something Karen said about moving from the vanguard of us to actual for-profit consultants who help the school districts implement this. And so when I talk to districts, you can give an overview, you can explain what's out there, but ultimately their easiest path forward is to hire somebody to do it. And so I don't know if they're in the case studies that, I don't know how you shortlist folks that are trusted, know how to do it, but to me, that's what I would want to point the districts towards. And then the other comment related to that is, I didn't see your case studies yet. Sorry, I'm just looking through this now.
Yep.
But a total levelized cost of energy is going to be to me, is just, that's the number. And if we have case studies that over X amount of years have shown that with these tax incentives that electric heat pump or an HVAC replacement is cheaper, all of those variables built in. I mean, that's it, right?
Yeah.
And so I just like, and my guess is some districts and some consultants need a template on how to show that information in a very clear way.
Yes.
But if we can get aligned on how people show that total levelized cost of energy for these products,
Yeah.
great.
Yeah, you'll see in the slides, they're look mostly just actually at first cost, not even as fancy. I mean, they do want to make sure that like over time, it's not gonna be more to maintain and that their energy bills aren't gonna go through the roof, but the people are mostly making it on first cost. And so yes, I have been like wheedling my way into early conversations and having the engineers redo their tables so they actually incorporate these incentives, because that's the thing is like engineers or the HVAC engineers are not used to incorporating incentives because they consider them like willy-nilly here today, gone tomorrow, can't, not hard enough to like make decisions around. Jenny, you want to jump in?
Yes, I was thinking that if we had a common survey that we could use and a common template that we could use to help you capture the data for the case studies, those of us that have deeper relationships with school districts and can help you and be your partners in that. So I think making it as easy for us as possible to be able to help get the data. I know that there are some really attractive ways of communicating what's possible, and I think the most recent report from NAAEE about climate change education has some examples in there that we could replicate. You asked about websites. And so I think that there's some models out there that we could use that would be familiar to the educators in this space.
Okay. Well, I have a link to the form in there right now that I've just been using for myself to dump stuff in, and I'm trying to keep it really minimal in terms of what we're asking. Again, these are like early stage leads. Really easy to fill out, minimal, and like, can I contact you, with the notion that, we will follow back up with folks as time and capacity allows, and that we at least just have some, that we're building a database of leads. So if there are fields in there that you think I should add on, let me know, but I tried to keep it super, super basic.
One suggestion, I can't remember if you already mentioned this, but as part of the website, I know you're going to have a lot of resources that hopefully folks are looking at. I've seen a lot of folks just in order to download a resource, like asking a set of questions. And so you could try to, like, okay, in order to get this download, like you get it for free, but you have to give me information on if you're thinking about this, and or at least capture their email or something like that to follow up, and maybe then ask them to fill out the survey, or just something like that as well, where they kind of have to do it, which is trickier, but might work.
Yeah, that's a great idea. I know RMI makes a practice of that. You got to give me your email every time you download that paper. So yeah, great ideas, great ideas. Yeah, so to the extent those of you who are, out there adopting projects in the world and following projects, we'd love to have you add those on. And then let's see. I think that closes out that item. Is there anything else, Jonathan, we want to say on number 4? Is that good?
I think that if, to the extent that folks could take 10 or 15 minutes and do a quick mental, like, hey, I've had these 6 conversations with schools, and put them in the database kind of as a follow-up to this call, I think that would be a great next step, just so we can start to get a picture. And then we'll kind of keep noodling on kind of how to push this back out as a resource for everybody, kind of given the feedback on this conversation.
Are there any particular incentives or pieces of the IRA you want to track, or could that be another set of fields? Because I think there's a lot of different ways to access IRA or IIJA funds. So if did you want specifically the tax credit, energy efficiency, so any specific parts that you're hoping to collect more than others?
I think any parts of IRA are great. So the way I had set the form right now was not based on the credit, but on the technology, right? So I basically had energy efficiency, charging infrastructure, electric school buses, solar energy storage, like trying to map in my brain, what are all the technologies that are supported in one way or another by IRA? And so had those listed there.
Yeah, I mean, I might suggest, yeah, at least having a field for some other ways. So like if we need to go back and say, hey, a new Republican Congress is now trying to take apart the greenhouse gas reduction fund specifically, it might be helpful to say, okay, well, these are those people or projects that would be threatened by that particular fund or whatever getting attacked, or if tax credit gets diminished in some way, you know, so that might be helpful. So we know how to, you know, definitely, especially for advocacy purposes, as we know that some of these pieces are going to go under attack, then we know what to do with it.
Yeah, I think that's just to like really make that really direct. Like, I think we all need to be thinking about this project, both because if we know who's thinking about it, we can help drive technical assistance and support to those districts, and because this is a political thing that we need to be able to tell stories about, you know, winning the win of the IRA, and that this is something that people should keep.
Yeah. This is all great segue to the last meaty item on our agenda, which is like, okay, so hopefully people will come to this website because they, you know, want to learn more about IRA, and inevitably they will have questions. You know, Undaunted as an organization, while we're dabbling in technical assistance in Massachusetts to really understand where the rubber is meeting the road in terms of this policy, we are not, you know, set up to provide direct technical assistance. That is not our model. But we recognize that this website will potentially be a place where people could raise their hand and say, you know what, I need more help. And so, you know, we're thinking about part of this website needs to have a, like, I want to talk to someone, I need more help with fill in the blank. I need more help with electric school buses. I need more help with solar. I need more help with geo. So understanding kind of like what groups on this call, you know, want to be, you know, want to be the ones we point to for various pieces, you know, understanding what your offerings are is another piece there. And then, you know, I think Anissa wanted to kind of throw an idea out here to the group about this whole technical assistance puzzle, because that's, you know, definitely one where there's huge need. So, Anissa, maybe I'll turn it over to you now to kind of talk about what you were thinking in terms of, could you share this Green Lights Grant Initiative example with us as one, you know, kind of in a corollary space? And I thought that was really interesting and wanted to hear more from you about what you had in mind.
Yeah, it's a very loose idea right now, but I'm bringing it to this group in the hopes that we can figure something out altogether. ASA posted about their Green Lights Grant Initiative, which is funded by Matthew McConaughey and Salesforce and, you know, small money. But it's specifically an initiative to help them, to help school districts write grants to get federal school safety dollars. And it came about after the Uvalde shooting, and Matthew McConaughey put up some money, and ASA stepped up to be sort of a lead in connecting these school districts. So in their case, it's like, it's a lot, it's resource intensive, right? Because they're actually hiring like grant writers for these districts. So it's like $40,000 to $50,000 per district, and so they're accepting applications from districts that want this kind of assistance, and they're basically creating like a cohort of districts that either are getting the grant writing support or are getting like a lighter level support, like office hours type of support. And that's for like federal grant writing. But when I saw that, one of the main questions we've been getting from our webcast series is, my school is doing a project and I need to talk to someone about where to start on specifically the tax side, which is a tax advisor, but like they're not quite ready to engage a tax advisor. Like they're a public school district, they don't really do the tax thing, and they just like don't really know where to start. And so it got me thinking about the fact that like it would be pretty helpful to have a call line of sorts for school districts, where there's a consultant on retainer that, you know, has a set number of hours they can spend with school districts, that is funded through sponsorship, that can, you know, advise school districts on how to take advantage of the ITCs in particular. And so it would be, you know, like it would be a contracted thing that a group of NGOs would sort of help coordinate. So I'm seeing getting that support through the technical centers. Help me with that acronym, Carolina.
Yeah, it's the Thriving Communities Technical Assistance
Oh,
Center.
Thriving Communities. Yeah.
Know that that's for EPA, but they're
Mhm.
supposed to be helping, and they're supposed to be helping under-resourced communities and providing like direct grant writing support and bilingual. I know this is like a push that we're making at the Alliance, is for them to have folks that are knowledgeable about electric school buses and how to work with school districts. So might be something to think about.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. Do you have a sense of whether they can give anything that could be construed as close to tax advice? Because I talked to like the DOE staff about like their technical assistance centers doing something like this, and they said like absolutely not. We are not supposed to use it to say anything related to taking advantage of these tax credits. So that's why I wasn't really thinking about any of the federally resourced things, but I'm super interested in whether, you know, whether there could be something with the Thriving Communities.
Yes, I don't know about the tax credits, so that's a fair question. Maybe they wouldn't be able to, but maybe there's something where
Maybe they could.
they could at least connect to someone else, or at least like they could tell a school district, we can't do that, but here's what you can. But yeah, I don't know enough about the tax credit portion of it.
Yep. Karen. Karen, are you there? Oh, you have your hand up, so I see a head shake, no worries. Does someone have a good contact with the like Thriving Communities structure? If you do, can you tell me? I would love to figure out if that's a pathway. Okay, cool, thanks. Mary, I would hope that the National Center could help with this. I know that is going to be defined, you know, after award. So love to keep this in mind as part of the structure of that.
I agree with you, and so this is really a need, and again, it's mostly a need on the HVAC side, because again, all the solar installers, they know how to talk about this. They've talked about this since the beginning of solar time. Same with energy storage, it's essentially the same developers. It's basically the geo guys who, and like the folks in the building early on in the building process that have no clue how to talk about this, and are not comfortable, you know, kind of talking about tax stuff at all, right? Like the engineers and HVAC folks, they want to steer clear of this. The utility folks, they want to steer clear of this. So like in all these meetings with school districts that I've been a part of, I've been the one who's had to say something about it, because everyone else says, my lawyers won't let me touch this, right? So no one else is willing to kind of put their neck out there and say, I think it might be something like $3.8 million that you're going to get back. Like no one else is willing to say that.
Yeah, and school districts don't trust it yet. So, you know, having someone that they can trust to talk to them in a straightforward way about it,
yeah,
would be really helpful. It seems like fairy dust money to them.
Totally.
Yeah.
Okay.
David,
You're on mute still.
I come from the union movement, so in blue cities where the building trades are active, where they have a significant part of construction that goes on, especially public construction, they're deeply familiar with how 179D works and are completely comfortable taking all the money and giving it back to their employer in this case. So because it just means future work. So there's long history there. I can put links to people who can talk about this, but that's not everywhere. And I know that that's only in certain big places, but in, it may not be out in Holyoke, but it'll definitely be in Boston that, like, there are 4 people I give you who know more about this than any CPA that you can find.
Yeah, I definitely think 179D, there are certain places where that is very well known. And it's also, it's been around in this context for a
Right.
while, you know,
That's
so
exactly right. That's exactly
yeah, so people are a little more familiar with it. That's great. Julia.
Yeah, I'm just curious as they explained like the technical assistance piece, and I'm just curious if anyone is looking at like state level approaches to potentially providing technical assistance, whether that be through legislation or state level funding, et cetera. I mean, I hear the conversation around pulling from the federal and even some local options or different grants, and just using this kind of community, maybe volunteer or otherwise, but just curious if anyone's looking at like policy options for a solution to this question.
To providing technical assistance on the state level.
Yeah, setting up state level.
Yeah, I mean, the closest thing to that is what Mary Florida brought forward, which is that the National Center on School Infrastructure is supposed to be focused on the state level when it gets set up, but that grant is small, so the capacity is going to be kind of tight, and then it's not awarded yet. It's supposed to be awarded in what, October-ish, Mary? So and then after that there'll be the design of it. It's a cooperative agreement with Ed, so there'll be a little bit of finagling there. So there's a little bit of time before that it's going to be available, and it might not be available in every state too. But I think that, like, as far as I know, that's like the most straightforward place where state level technical assistance would be.
Okay, great. Yeah, and I'd be curious if anyone, as you do advocacy in your own location, are considering putting some, bringing actual policy forward through like the legislative process or through your own budget process or something like that. Yeah, versus the money that might flow through from national to states. Thanks.
I can share what Pennsylvania is attempting and trying to do. There's a legislation currently that's made it through the House that will create a Solar for Schools grant program. And part of that program is going to include technical assistance, because the goal of this program is to make sure that we maximize all the IRA incentives, all the federal funding out there. So as part of that program, assuming it gets passed through the Senate this legislation season, and then there's a budget for it, which as of right now, there is no budget for it. There are plans to provide technical assistance, at least for solar and clean energy. So we'll see how that moves forward.
And could you drop a link to that bill, to the piece of legislation?
Sure will.
That's great. Craig, what do you got?
Well, we said it a few times now that contractors, and Sarah, you mentioned that HVAC contractors specifically won't touch this or don't know. I'm just wondering if a separate change model that we could pursue is a similar call like this one here, except have it stacked full of HVAC contractors. Because if they can get educated on how this works and what they can do, and whether that's them being able to apply for the tax aspects themselves or being aware of the resources out there, like some of these upcoming grant and assistance centers, then we're kind of educating the educators who are working directly with school districts. And I've got to believe that they have a mission alignment to learn that, because ultimately they're going to outcompete their competitors if they can drop their cost of their same product down. And so, I don't know, Nisa, we could talk about if that's worthwhile pursuing, and then if it is, how we get a bunch of HVAC installers and contractors and manufacturers together.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great point. I did ask Tim Unruh at NISCO if he was interested in this idea. And I think that's another sort of a target, the major target audience.
Yeah.
For, you know, the big ones already
Agreed.
know about this and might even
Yeah.
fund something like this. But the smaller shops might not.
Yeah, I've got some ideas too. I'll follow up with you on some network if we want to go that route.
Okay, cool.
They could also, sorry, I'm jumping in because my
Great.
hand being up doesn't mean I can talk. But I can.
I was gonna call on you, but I wasn't sure if you were.
Yeah, I know. It's like, I think she might, but I don't know. And there's my dad calling again. So I'm gonna have to jump off after this. But one thing we could do is we could talk to some of those HVAC suppliers about actually funding the kind of TA platform, because it's to their benefit for the word to get out. And they know that when they send the email saying, hey, this grant fund is available, it doesn't always have the same impact as if there's like a parallel entity providing it. So.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's absolutely right. Yeah. That
All
would
right.
be the
Apologies, but
ideal
now I have to, yeah.
Okay.
Yes, I apologize. I gotta answer my dad's call.
Okay. All right. Natasha.
Yeah, I was just gonna mention real quick, I think technical assistance from the state level is great, but I just, not to burst any bubbles, I think the state governments and even EPA, from conversations I've had, are really behind on the tax credits. They don't have the capacity. And I think they're also just kind of waiting for someone to really explain it to them, to really dig into it. They don't kind of understand the direct pay piece much at all, let alone some of the other more complicated versions of those provisions. So I think it's going to be up to the group here to do a lot of education, even on the government entities of this country, to kind of help school districts along here. I know in our state advocacy on the electric school bus side, we always encourage and try to ask for the funding to come with technical assistance at the state level. And that's just on electric school buses, not even touching the tax credits yet. And that's proven to be a challenge. So I think something obviously that's still to work towards, but there's going to be an uphill battle here for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, good note for everyone. On that note, I should probably pass it back to you, Jonathan, Sarah, since we've got just a couple minutes left. But if anybody has other thoughts, just feel free to reach out directly. I'm just trying to kind of gather the landscape to understand what the opportunity is here, and then I'll certainly bring it to the group and we can figure out who wants to do what.
Thanks, Anissa. And thanks everyone for all the comments and questions. I feel like we got a lot on the table, a lot of ideas there. Sarah, Ross, do you have anything else?
No,
As
I'm
we
good.
close out? Okay.
Thank you.
Well, then I think just given the time, I'll take us to next steps on the agenda. Two sort of follow-ups coming out of this conversation. If you're up to spend, 15 or 20 minutes, like kind of downloading out of your brain, hey, here are some districts or schools that I've talked with into the form, so we can start kind of seeing what this picture looks like across our network. Want to kind of reiterate that ask. If you have thoughts about the website, definitely, appreciate people taking a look at that and sending thoughts on that. As I said, we're going to build out a section on 179D, transportation and charging infrastructure. That's all kind of to come. So if you have more thoughts or resources on those to kind of speed us along, appreciate folks sharing. The last summer project, kind of Julia's questions kind of preview this. We are working on a policy brief, as well as sort of Natalia's comments around for state action to support all this. So there is an outline of the brief there. And if you have bandwidth or want to get more involved in that project, there's an opportunity there. So appreciate the Pennsylvania example today. Those are the kinds of examples we're looking for to populate that brief. And then we thought we would try to have 2 more calls of this group before the end of the year, one at the beginning of October, and then one maybe at the beginning of November. So October 4th and November 8th, and welcome input on what should be on those agendas. Otherwise, we'll just kind of keep kind of rolling along with these projects. And if folks have other kind of conversation areas that you think would be good for the whole group, please bring them along and let us know if there are other folks we should be including on the invitation. I think that's it. Thank you, everyone. Good to see you. Happy back to school. Take care of our
Thank you.
babies.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Bye.
See ya.
Everyone, take care.